طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا فعلمنا يا رب، ولا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا ففهمنا يا رب. طيب الحمد لله we reached sixth lesson, introduction to أصول الفقه. الحمد لله, extending Arabic by a bit I think was a little bit better, and hopefully also Arabic will tie with أصول الفقه because a big chunk of studying أصول الفقه is Arabic, inshallah. So hopefully they'll tie in together, and I'll keep. And if the subject gets represented in the future, I'll keep reviewing the slides to hopefully make them in the most optimal manner as much as possible. So we'll try to review a bit, and then we'll overview the 10 preliminary points of Usul al-Fiqh, then take takeaways and suggestions and see what's next. Off the top of my head, what's next is logic, mantiq. So we'll take that, inshallah. طيب, review. One, what does Nahu deal with? Um, they always make sense in my head. Then when I read them, like the question it sounds big. What does Nahu deal with compared to Sarf? They both differentiate in their focus. So what does Nahu focus on, and what does Sarf focus on? It should have been in the definition or in the scope. One of them. الموضوع أو الحد. Yeah, you can say nothing will happen. Huh? No answer. What about you? You have an answer?
It's the ending of the words.
Excellent. Which one is that?
That's no.
Excellent.
No.
طيب, what about Sarf?
So,
So Nahu deals with the ending of words within phrases. Doesn't look by itself.
to the roots of the word.
Yeah,
The
the
note.
the roots and the morphological changes of the word. Words by themselves. Sarf, you can study words by themselves. Because you don't need to study them together because they're not influenced grammatic. Grammar is influenced by where the word is in the sentence and what comes before it and so forth. فَنَحْوُ deals with the ending of the words and the phrases itself. And that's why some books of Nahu start with kalam. They define kalam, speech. Why? Because now when you know speech, now let's take speech and study its types and apply. But sarf, you don't need to do it with kalam. You can do it with kalima. Take a word, right? You take the different cases. You might use examples of that word in a sentence, but you don't necessarily need that. You can still study subject matter. طيب, who's the pioneer of Nahu and who presumably instructed him to do so?
Abu Aswad.
Abu Aswad. Ad,
I'm
you
not
know,
sure of the name.
Ad-Du'ali.
Sorry?
Ad-Du'ali. So you're right, Abu
Yeah.
Aswad Ad-Du'ali. Okay, who instructed him? Akram, maybe you know. Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. They say that Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib instructed him to do so. طيب, what's the ruling of studying Arabic? يلا, this one's easier. يلا يا أكرم. حرام؟
No,
مكروه؟
it is
مباح؟ مستحب؟
for to know some Arabic, I think.
Okay, it might be. طب بس in general, like on the community.
In the community, it is for kifaya.
Excellent. It's a communal obligation. We need enough people. Maybe certain sections of Nahu might be fard. Sorry, of Arabic might be fard. Depends, right? But generally, it's a communal obligation, right? Personally obligatory on those people uh, who have to teach and so on. Right. Even if one does not achieve fluency, how can Arabic studies assist one? And what were some examples given last week illustrating this? So maybe someone doesn't reach full fluency. Would they still benefit of learning Arabic, even if they don't really go very far?
Yes.
Like, what can they be doing with that Arabic that they learn?
They could be listening to the Quran and actually understand a few more words.
Okay, so they can understand short passages from Quran or type if they work at it. Yeah, they can. What else can they might do? I think I gave a couple of examples. Someone, for example, can use it in certain writings, although maybe in speech they might not be that great. Or the opposite. Their focus is to learn so that they can do certain kinds of speeches, but maybe because they prepare speeches more than writing, their writing is slightly weaker than their speaking. Hmm. Like whom? For example, you could think of مثلا a translator or مثلا a khatib, So does a khatib need to know the explanations of everything? No, they're preaching. But do they want to know enough Arabic to give a khutbah? Yeah. So as long as they can turn the English content that they have into its original Arabic and it's grammatically sound, then then they can at least fulfill that role. Maybe that's all they do. Alhamdulillah. So they learn enough Arabic to just give speeches once a week. So a translator probably need more Arabic because they're translating the entire book. But maybe they don't know a lot of Arabic, and they know very good Arabic in that subject. Okay, that's fine. For example, I would think a translator of children book would know less than a translator of classical books, like مثلا this one. It's originally a fiqh book in Arabic, right? So like that. So one can still do that, and I think that makes it, I think, motivating. I hope. Yani. I can't speak from experience because that was not mine. From stories I've heard, others, that's what got them going. And doing these little projects actually gave them the motivation to continue. So, right. So if you find something practical for yourself to do, please, by all means, jump on it and learn and do. Like finally, who would need to study Arabic classically and systematically? That got kind of got covered by the third question, but let's say it anyway.
Scholars.
Yeah, scholars, Arabic teachers, specialists in Arabic and stuff, right? They all, especially if they're Sharia students, they would really have to focus on the classical Arabic, not just modern Arabic, because modern Arabic might have some errors, might not be the most eloquent, and they would do it systematically because they want to reach a good level, right? So they don't they wouldn't do this haphazard. I see a hand.
Yeah.
Probably getting bored of the knowledge map, but we're just reviewing. Four main subjects. Sharia sciences. We're done with. Oops. Oh, yes. No, the black. Okay, so the one in black is the one we're talking about today. And supposedly green is what we'll cover. Yep, and green, green is what we'll cover. I gotta make these more consistent. But yeah, so usul al-fiqh is today. So logic, aqidah, fiqh, and tazkiyah is all what's left. So alhamdulillah, yani in a month's time we'll be done pretty much our series, inshallah, almost. Right, here are some key texts to get us to appreciate the importance of usul al-fiqh prior to us getting the preliminary points. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم إن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر. So here Allah is instructing us to obey Allah and obey the messenger. And if we differ about something, we have to take it back to Allah and His messenger. Now the Sahaba did this, right? They took it back to the Quran. They checked their understanding of the Quran with the Prophet ﷺ. They went back to the Prophet ﷺ directly. But once the Prophet ﷺ passes away, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, how do we go back to the Quran and Sunnah? Ilm Usul al-Fiqh says something about that. It gives us a systematic answer about that. It doesn't only tell us how to go back, who goes back. So had they referred to the messenger and to those having authority among them, the truth of the matter would have come to the knowledge of those of them who are able to investigate. لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم ولو ردوه إلى الرسول وأولي الأمر منهم لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم. Those who have understanding would know the matter. So people here are not the same level. There are people of understanding and people of not understanding. But in the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ remarked when the Sahaba gave the man who asked, I have an injury. Can I do something else? Do I have to wash? Can I resort to something else? And they said no. What did he say? Shouldn't they have asked when they don't know? ألا سألوا إذ لم يعلموا إنما شفاء العي السؤال أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. The cure of ignorance is asking. So when one doesn't know, they go to a knowledgeable person and ask. طيب. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, this part of the 40 Nawi, إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. There's lawful is clear, unlawful is clear, and between them are matters that most people don't know. Right, so what do we do? Who do we ask? If we don't know, who do we ask? So you get this idea. There's a theme in the Sunnah of what are the sources of knowledge, who is the authority that answers, and obviously, even implied that there's a method. People don't just answer by whims. That would be very silly. The Quran is a book of guidance. The Sunnah is not based on whims, and then when you apply the Quran and Sunnah, you apply them on whims. That's going against what they're all for. So you definitely go by their methodology, right? Even if it's not stated. But we also will know, and this is something that Usul Fiqh teaches us, that the methodology was actually taught, as we saw in all the ulum, that people had the faculty and the approach. It's just because they were more of an oral society, things got codified later. But what was codified was already there as a community. Not in everyone, but at least with the ulama from. طيب. Usul al-fiqh. What's usul? Like we did before, this language, usul is the plural of asl. It's the base of something. الأصل ما بني عليه غيره. Right? الأصل is one of its meanings, has many meanings in Arabic. It's anything that is a base. Like when Allah talked about the firm tree in the Quran, He said, أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء. Its base is firm, its roots are firm, and its branches are in the sky. Referring to the believer. The believer and the good word, La ilaha illallah, is like the good and noble tree. Fiqh is what? You probably know this already or know from before. Fiqh is understanding. But as a technical term, fiqh, we will cover it in a future lesson, inshallah. It's knowing the Shara'i rulings from their detailed proofs, right? Or secondary proofs. That's not what we're talking about here. Here it's usul al-fiqh. This is a subject by itself. It's almost like the theory of fiqh. What is it? It's the general knowledge of the proofs of fiqh, right? The manner in deriving from them, and the standing of the individual who does the deriving, right? ومعرفة طرق الفقه الإجمالية وطرق الاستفادة منها وحال المستفيد, or something like that, something close to that, right? So, and I put in bold these three kind of main subparts of the definition are the main subjects of usul al-fiqh. So if you were to author a book of usul al-fiqh and limit it to its basics, you would cover these three subjects. You would talk about the general proofs of fiqh. What are they? Why do they stand? Some basic considerations about them. طيب, okay. How do we derive from them? Okay, and who has fulfilled the conditions of deriving properly from them? That's ilm usul al-fiqh. The subject matter are general proofs of fiqh versus specific. Specific is fiqh. So for example, like what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, uphold the prayer. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, orders us to uphold the prayer. طيب, what does usul al-fiqh say? Usul al-fiqh will give us a principle like the default status of imperatives are Sharia obligation, unless an alternation changes its obligation to something else. So, the default of an order like that is it's obligatory. Then when we see that the Prophet ﷺ taught the same thing, you know, the Arabi came to him, he said, there's only 5 salahs that I would do I have to do anything more? He said, nope, nothing more, and so forth. And many other proofs, realize it's categorically salah's fault, right? But Usul al-Fiqh has the asl that I can apply regardless of the subject, right? It makes the interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah systematic and consistent, right? What's the fruit? You know, the methodology of scholarly interpretation of fiqh. It's not just random. It's not by whims. It's not by desires. People aren't just reacting to one another. You know, they're getting mad, so I'll do a madhab. And what about you? Oh, I'm not mad from him. I didn't like his biryani, so I'll do another madhab. It doesn't work like that. The madhab came out of scholarly reasons, right? Understand the nature and prerequisites for ijtihad and fatwa, right? How do people reach that level of ifta? Why were the mujtahids? What are the knowledges that they knew, right? And obviously, what makes us appreciate the Sharia and its inner dimensions. If they saw these patterns in the Sharia, this gives us, like you remember on the session on Arabic, repetition was not just merely repetition. Stories were not just merely stories in the Quran. There's a lot of wisdom and benefit in studying these patterns. And the patterns, not just from a linguistic point of view, even from a Shara'i point of view. This shows us that Allah is truly Hakim. Right? And then the Quran itself, Yasin, وَالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. This is truly a wise Quran that's divine from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things aren't arbitrarily. You know, they're there to point. They're signs. They're truly signs from Allah, right? But maybe more on the legal sense, right? Maybe we appreciate the signs of Allah more in nature and in morals, which is fine. But other people who like this kind of thing, they were blown away. They said, "Wow, these patterns, like, how are they just there by themselves? They're not. They're revealed by Allah. They're further testimony that this Quran is from Allah and that the Sunnah is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And especially in our times, maybe the one can fortify and dispel misconceptions about words like Sharia, fiqh, ijtihad, taqleed, madhahib. These kind of words, unfortunately, have probably more misunderstanding about them than not, even unfortunately in the areas of academia. Until, inshallah, one day academia is filled by, proper, balanced, traditionally trained Muslims, then, maybe the story can be different. But until then, there will be and have been books that have been written about this that are either slightly off or totally off or so forth, right? Shows, YouTubers, it's just, so it can be, the very common, even political understanding of the elites is usually very negative about Sharia and Deen and so on. But the merit, obviously, is one of the most important subjects, فضله, which is the basis of fiqh, right? Fiqh, if fiqh is the base of halal and haram, this is the ilm that gives the basis of fiqh. So it is the basis of the basis of halal and haram. It's very important, right? Various modern scholars refer to usul al-fiqh as the methodology of thinking or the philosophy of Islam. Just so as how important it is as a subject. That in the back of your mind. It's a Sharia science. It's a relation from the tools of sound understanding. من العلوم الشرعية من علوم الآلة. When Imam al-Ghazali praised it, he said one of its praises that he conveyed about usul al-fiqh, he said that it's a middle ground between ulum that are purely textual and purely rational. It's right in the middle, right? It has a rational component to it, but it's based on uh, texts and sharia, right? It's based on that. So it's definitely a Shara'i science is very unique. Like Pioneer. Pioneer is the one in bold, but we can say a little bit more about this maybe inshallah. So Pioneer again, remember, is not necessarily the first person, but might be the first person that taught or wrote uh, in a public manner or so forth. Something got documented. So this person came, as we saw in Arabi was already known. Let's say Ibn Abu Aswad al-Dawali systemized what is already known into a subject. So what did Imam al-Shafi'i do? He he wrote a risala on a request when people pose questions about usul al-fiqh, right? Write to us about X, Y, Z. So he penned his risala. What happened before that? Let's take two steps back. The Prophet ﷺ obviously would be asked questions about the Sahaba. Any questions they have on their understanding would be by the Prophet ﷺ. Or the Prophet ﷺ has different encounters with Sahaba who were designated to teach or designated to ifta, and he would ask them, how would you do so? And they would give answers in the light of the, I would go to the Quran, then if I don't find, I would go to the Sunnah, if I don't find, then I would practice my judgment, so forth. So he would ensure that they have the right methodology. And we also know that not all the Sahaba gave fatwa. So that means certain people acquired a certain level and others didn't. Right? But wait, okay. Well, at his time, they would ask him questions. We don't need any more authority. Or at his time, we can also ask those we allowed us to ask questions to. But what happens once that the Prophet ﷺ passes away and Muslims start expanding? Like mesh, in the beginning phase, they will ask the Sahaba. But then now there's new questions. They need new answers. How do these new answers maintain the proper methodology from before? Then the process of ijtihad needs to be taught. And that's what was taught. That's why ulama they didn't just give ifta until their scholars checked them and said, you go ahead. Like Imam Shafi'i, who gave fatwas, they say, I think by 16 or 17, he was already taught and checked by his teachers that now he's reached the level in which he can do that. Mesh. Then the writings came and schools formed. And not only did the madhahib form in fiqh, they also naturally formed in usul because they're not talking about fiqh just as thousands of rulings. You have the usul that is the basis of these thousands of rulings. Well, we can break up the schools into two main schools, as the mashayikh say, madrasatul mutakallimin or madrasatul ahnaf. Right? The school of the Hanafis, they also call it the school of the fuqaha. And this was the inductive school. They based it mainly, they worked their way up from the fatwas. So they gathered the fatwas of their ulama and they induced from them the principles. while the school of the mutakallimin is the majority, went the other way around mainly. They started from the principles and they went down to check how it plays out in terms of ifta and practical answers. Okay. 7th century onwards, some scholars tried to merge both methods. So they did a hybrid method of writing. So that was a school, تجمع بين الطريقتين, that came later. And then in the modern era, a lot of the works are focused on introduction or advanced writings about specific areas, specific topics of usul, or preparing people to study usul al-fiqh because they need some kind of orientation. I mean, you're not just going to finish your professional studies and then jump into Sharia studies and think that you're going to study usul al-fiqh. So you probably need some texts to prepare you for the classical text. So they would write books and writings like that for, you know, Sharia seminaries, high schools, universities, and so forth. And these were helpful because, when Muslims took a back seat with colonization and so forth, we needed some things to help us reconnect with those subjects. The names, Usul al-Fiqh is obviously a name, but it can be named many other names. علم الأصول, without to use fiqh, just take كده علم الأصول, or أصول التشريع, the أصول of تشريع, أصول الشريعة, right? Or قواعد تفسير النصوص, the principles of interpreting the شرعي نصوص. Can be, but probably أصول الفقه is probably the most famous one, but you might find these names. Yes.
I have a question for the previous slide.
No.
Where it says the 7th century, they tried to hybrid and combine both of them. What happened with that?
So
just break
they
up?
would write they would write books that have both methods in them rather than predominantly one. Okay.
But that's like two different schools.
So the two, so what I understand, there was primarily one method
Mhm.
they would write this way, and primarily one method they would write that way, or that's how they authored their usul.
Mhm.
Then came writings that kind of combine between both. They're not more on the inductive side or on the deductive side. They brought both within the usuli text that they're writing.
So are there books like that still?
Yeah, no. So you can find books categorized in any of these subjects. Sorry, in any of these methods. The older like this is a fiqh book based on Madrasat al-Fuqaha. So you'll know that this is a Hanafi text and usul. Or this is a text method from the Shafi'is, Malikis, and whatever that's basically showing the way of the mutakallimi. And then maybe latter texts that tried to combine the benefit from both sides and put that in their works. That's what meant by hybrid. Not necessarily a third way, but it's a way that brought both methods into uh, and then the modern, I don't know where the modern stands, so I just kind of there. I think it's more like preparatory kind of studies for that. But a scholar in usul will probably give more insight on this. Is that better or clear? So name is okay. Sources. Like sources, Arabic is the main one. So remember in the definition, go back. It's the general knowledge of the proofs of fiqh. So that's like the Quran and the Sunnah and Ijma' and so forth. The manner in deriving from them, a lot of that is Arabic. What do you do with an injunction, like an imperative? What do you do with a general text? Like the general texts, are they always specified by something? How do you infer something from something else? And so forth. There's various patterns that you don't study just merely for linguistic reasons. You want to apply the study of language, a lot of it, the tools that you took in balagha and nahw and whatever, especially balagha and so forth, and apply them in relation to ahkam. In relation to ahkam. So, for example, one of the examples they might say, مثلا, that the present verb, if it's attached to a lam, the default of it is order. فليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق فليضربن بخمرهن على جوبهن. That kind of structure shows obligation. So usul al-fiqh needs Arabic, right? It needs theology because I want to study um, and know where the ahkam come from. But if I don't know that Allah exists and He has perfection and He's the one that has authority, then would I do that? So some books build it up from scratch so that and or maybe not absolutely scrap, but to tie in these subjects. And there's other things that are beyond my knowledge, the theological considerations of usul al-fiqh, so they're there as well, and fiqh because it's kind of like the raw material, right? You as you're writing the subject, you're going to give examples. So to give examples, you're not going to give examples that don't stand, examples that are authoritative. The practical manner from these properly cited and properly referenced, good, and it backs up what you're saying in usul al-fiqh, right? So these are possible main sources of the subject. Shari ruling, it's communal obligatory, is the pattern that we're getting in most of the subjects. On the Ummah's personal obligation on select individuals like muftis, like specialists in usul al-fiqh, and so forth. And there needs to be always people that are specialists in this area. I think this is the last slide. We did way better in time than I thought. What does it tackle? Okay, مسائله يعني. Okay. For example, the moral شرعي rulings, تكليف, and circumstantial rulings, وضعي, right? What's the difference between them? Right? There's rulings that are done to that, that that give some moral responsibility, and some of them are underlying rulings, like a condition for something, a deterrent for something. They're not in themselves something that you do or you don't, but you use them as demarcations for what to do and not to do, right? Like time. Time makes salah obligatory. So in itself, it doesn't obligate something on you, but it obligates the salah based on certain times. Orders and prohibitions, the general and specific, like I said before, right? This is taught from a certain angle in Arabic. Here it's taught the categories of speech and so forth from the angle of rulings, right? From the al-ahkam, sources of the Sharia and ranking these proofs, right? How do they rank in terms of their authority, and what do you do if proofs look seemingly conflicting? How do you reconcile them, right? And obviously, like mentioned before, who does ifta? What are the manners of ifta? Who does ijtihad? What is the condition and criteria, and so forth? So these are some of the topics that we'll tackle, inshallah. Like takeaways and suggestions. Since it's a technical subject, it's hard to give advice about it practically. Honestly, ask people who this is, if their area is this area, they'll give you much better advice than myself. But if I can think of, the first advice would, similar to what I did in other subjects, I would not advise you to jump in the subject right away. First advice for everyone is first study your fard al-ayn. Study your personal obligatory. That fiqh is way more important than studying usul al-fiqh. Okay? And in the personal obligatory, some personal obligatory books, actually like this one I have, and another one, the one that I'm using for the class, it has a very small section based on usul al-fiqh. I'll tell you what are the ahkam al-shar'iyya, what's the difference between wajib and mustahab and mubah and makruh and haram, because that's what's going to tackle in the book. And it will emphasize that you have to learn your deen from proper authorities, especially in the areas in aqidah, fiqh, and tazkiyah, and so forth. So your fard ayn will actually give you sometimes a glimpse of the area of usul al-fiqh that applies to you. Okay. Now, you can expose yourself. I don't think, any harm in any modern overview or classes, like, for example, in the topics of history of Sharia and fiqh and whatever. The historical angle is nice. There's a lot of lessons. You're hearing about a lot of pious, erudite individuals. You take from their spiritual state, you learn their character, you appreciate what they did. Now, alhamdulillah, you did your fard al-ayn. Maybe you did subjects that are maybe, uh, springing out from the school. I think I was wondering what all this I was thinking, and now I'm saying to people sitting, I think, in the monitor area, in the mic. Yeah, no, I think the mic is picking up in the main area. I was like, am I hearing things? Am I echoing? That's what's echoing. خير إن شاء الله. Now, okay, no, let's say, mashallah, people like you are motivated, you're disciplined, you study, you're type. Then if someone is, they covered their furud, they have the aptitude to study the subject. Again, I'm not trying to be redundant, but one would study the subject in a proper way. So study usul proper, you need to, for example, study a primer, like for example al-waraqat or mukhtasar al-manar, or for the ahnaf, or maybe something else, right? And you study complementary subjects so that you don't get lost. You'll need a level of Arabic to study usul. You'll need to be good in theology, fiqh, at least on a level that you're not totally lost in the subject. So if you have a teacher, they will guide you on how to be properly prepared for that. And then you gradually run through the curriculum of your madhab. So, مثلا, you would study waraqat, then maybe you'd study, الأصول الفقهية مكية or something like that. I can't remember some of the Shafi'i authors' name. Then maybe you do Lubb al-Usul, then you do Imam al-Baydawi's text. But you're going step by step from very basic to more advanced, more advanced, more advanced. And you enrich your studies, if I understand correctly, with other subjects. Some of them are part of Usul al-Fiqh or complementary to it, like the history of fiqh, fatwa collections, assessing them and so forth, books on the aims of Sharia and so forth. Again, whoever is teaching you or the seminary or university that you're part of, if this is their area or this is one of their strengths, they would have that set up for you. Right? They would have that set up for you, or something even better than what I mentioned. I'm just kind of giving hints, and I'm looking to, inshallah, develop and improve these slides, inshallah. طيب. I forgot to erase the slide because it was from last week. Last term there was oops. There was a survey, mid-class survey. I can still offer one if you want to give me feedback. I think I'm just gonna do it at the end. But the takeaway there is the last line there. Inshallah, we will cover logic, mantiq next week, inshallah. بإذن الله تعالى, which wraps up the topics of tools. And then we'll jump into probably the most practical of these subjects, Aqidah, Fiqh, and Tazkiyah, as the wrap up, inshallah, for the course. Yeah, no, this was from last term. So I worked my way through the slides, and then when I got here, I forgot. So yeah, there's no February 18th. That was from last term. Wait, I can actually erase that. Keep this in case I ever do a mid-class survey. There you go. Any questions, thoughts, complaints? We finished early, so I hope it's not rushed. We did this actually. Wow, it's faster than I thought. We did this only half an hour.
You could have put time in this one.
Uh-huh.
So it's good.
طيب, خلاص. If you guys have no questions, we can wrap it here, inshallah. You have an early night, especially if you're fasting today or something, gets you a chance to rest. Or if you're intending to stay in the masjid, you have a nice half an hour or so before salah. Good? خلاص. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيد المرسلين